Hi there, I'm Laura at Aquamarine18 and welcome to my channel. Thanks for watching. I have a quick video today I thought I would make. I very unexpectedly ended up with some free time today. It's a really busy time for me with school starting and work starting for the semester, but I got some time this afternoon and I had wanted to make a VR, so I thought I would jump on and do that. So a little while ago, Casper over at BoyDiviner, a channel that's quite new to me actually, had made a video on 5 decks that intimidated him. And it wasn't a tag or anything like that. But then later on in his TarotTube response, which I believe is actually how I found his channel, when there was a question in there, there was something like future video ideas or ideas for videos for people to make. And he said, oh, well, maybe other people would make a video on the deck they find intimidating also. So I figured, it doesn't have to be a tag. Why not make a VR on that? So this is my VR to BoyDiviner on decks that I find intimidating. And what I'm going to do is share 3 decks first that I find intimidating. And actually they're 1 tarot deck and 2 oracle decks, surprisingly, I think. But I'll share 2 that I find, 2 oracle and 1 tarot that I find intimidating. And then I'll just finish by sharing 1 because I think ending on a kind of really positive note is cool. On a deck that really intimidated me initially, or would have intimidated me at one point, very much so, but that now I really love. I think that these intimidating decks or challenging decks, for whatever reason, they can turn into decks that are really fun to work with. When you've done the kind of learning or work or practicing with them that you need in order to feel less intimidated, like once you've gotten to know them. So I'll finish with that. The first deck, and the only tarot deck on the list I want to share as a deck I find intimidating, is also one of the decks that I think is the most beautiful in my collection, and that's the Margaret Peterson Tarot. Many folks will have seen this deck, I'm sure. It's a deck that lots of people have, and this was a deck that I got because I kept seeing it on Instagram and YouTube and other places. And every time I would see it on Instagram, whatever card somebody had posted, I would think, oh, that is beautiful. Like, what is this amazing thing? How do I get that? And so I bought it. And the cards are very large and very bordered. And it's the only deck in my collection, the only one tarot deck, that is not very Rider-Waite-Smith in terms of its imagery, but is also not a pip deck either. So it really is its own set of images, and the images are really beautiful and really deep. I love the colors in the images, and I feel like these cards have so much to say. But I find this deck really intimidating because it's just not really so much in a system. It's really its own thing. And because I feel like there's so many layers to the artwork in this deck, I really feel like there's a lot to get out of it, a lot of meaning to pull out of it. And I find that intimidating, coupled with the fact that when I look at the imagery, I don't really have the familiar Rider-Waite-Smith or Pips or Marseille to fall back on really at all. Obviously, I can look at a card like the 7 of Coins, say, and think, okay, it says 7 of Coins on it. I have associations with the 7 of Coins in terms of 7 of Pentacles in the Rider-Waite-Smith, or 7 coins or 7 in the Earth suit if I was reading a Pip deck or a Marseille deck, and just kind of superimpose that on this deck. But that feels, a little bit, I don't know, unfair to this deck or something, for lack of a better way of putting it, because it really has its own voice and personality, and I think is really calls for intuition. There's the odd card, like in the Major Arcana more so, like this Moon card has a lot to pull out that, is very reminiscent of systems, but there's also a lot in there that isn't, right? So I feel intimidated by this deck because it's so unique. And I really feel like there's so much to get out of it, and I never feel like I'm quite getting there, or I doubt if I'm quite getting there. you know, and it doesn't have a massive guidebook or anything like that. It just has a little paper pamphlet. So it's not like there's a kind of ton of study materials that go with it that I could read. It really is a deck that calls for that kind of purely intuitive style of reading, at least for me. I'm sure others read this deck in all kinds of ways, but I find that intimidating personally. In terms of oracle decks, I picked two. And the first one I love, and I love playing around with, and that's the Open Portals Playing Cards, which is by James R. Eads. There's the back. And I backed this deck. This was, I think, the first thing I ever backed on Kickstarter, or maybe the second. And there were a bunch of different kind of color options and gilding options at the time. And this is the dark side version. So the cards are black. They're in order. You can tell because I've been looking at them with the guidebook. I got the cherry red gilding. The red gilding was only for Kickstarter, so I thought, you know, I'm going to get that one. And this deck I really got because I wanted to become comfortable looking at playing cards. And I have some kind of ancestral connection to reading playing cards, but I've never, you know, had that be a big part of my practice, or any part of my practice, really. And I was thinking, okay, you know, I feel like with having learned to work with pip decks and with Marseille decks, you know, this is kind of another step in that kind of direction. And these are so beautiful, and I'm such a fan of James R. Eads, I couldn't not get them, knowing that I would be really intimidated by them because, you know, I haven't really read playing cards. So I bought one book on playing card divination, specifically. So I've been looking at that book, and I should have brought that book downstairs with me, but it's somewhere. I have one book on playing card divination. And then I have this deck, and obviously my house is full of playing cards because we play cards all the time. And this deck comes with two manuals, and one of them is to play a game with the deck that James Eads and I believe his brother designed this game specifically around the deck. And then there's also an Open Portals for Oracles guidebook. And this, actually, I think this was a stretch goal. And it opens, and it's this kind of pamphlet like this, which is cool. And it has a meaning for each of the cards. And so, you know, all of the threes are related to uncertainty, for example. All of the eights are related to strength. All of the sevens are related to excitement. And some of those keywords that he's got there, I can connect really readily to the way that I think of pip decks or Marseille decks. So I think fours are structure, for example, and I can connect that to the Rider-Waite-Smith, to pips, to Marseille. But some of them actually don't feel that intuitive to me, so there's that difficulty. I also feel like, in a way, the fact that this deck has this other game associated with it and has all this extra artwork on it beyond just the playing cards, I thought this would kind of make it more approachable or accessible to me, but in a way I think it actually made it more intimidating in a particular kind of way, because now, you know, instead of just having, for example, we'll pull out the hearts suit here. Now, instead of just having the Two of Hearts, and I can think of that in terms of the Two of Cups in other systems if I wanted to read that way, or I can look at the Two of Hearts in my playing card book and look at it that way. Now I also have this Two of Hearts portal for the inner being. So it has keywords on it that also go with the game, right? And it has this distinct artwork. And some of these I can get ready associations from. The Three of Hearts is portal for the heartbroken, which immediately we can think of Rider-Waite-Smith. Three of Hearts, but not all of them do. Some of them feel really different to me, you know? And so that is a bit jarring at times. And I've played around with it, and I like playing around with it, and it's beautiful. And I do still want to learn to feel more comfortable working with playing cards, but again, I feel like kind of like the Margaret Peterson this one is not, to me, a straightforward playing card deck. It's not, perhaps it's kind of a strange place to really start with something like playing cards. And I know that there's a lot in it. There's a lot to the meanings that James Eads has come up with. There's a lot of interesting ideas in there, and I want to feel like I'm doing the deck justice when I work with it, and that is intimidating to me to try to think about. The third intimidating deck I have, and the last one I'm going to talk about, also an oracle deck, is this deck called the Moon Oracle. Let the phases of the moon guide your life. And when I work with oracle decks, I work with them either as a kind of card of the day, draw a card and read the message, or perhaps, pair them with tarot and just read them intuitively. But this deck is intimidating for me because this deck really has a system. It has a huge book with a lot of very tiny type in it. It has, I don't want to say suits, but it has different types of cards in here. So there are a bunch of cards that are moon phase cards. And I got this because I'm learning astrology and I'm interested in moon phases. And I always do a tarot reading for myself at new and full moon times. There's the back. And so I thought that this would be a good one to work with in that way. So it has these different moon phases that are all elemental also. So there's, waxing crescent in fire, first quarter waxing in fire, you get the idea, waxing gibbous in fire, and it goes along with keywords, some of which feel intuitive to me based on the moon phases and elements, and some of which don't, which makes it a bit tricky for me. Then it has a bunch of cards, and I separated this before I made this video. Then it has a bunch of cards which are goddesses. So I'm not sure how many of them there are here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 goddesses. And these have also astrological correspondences associated with them. And I don't know that much about different pantheons of deities. Some of these I know a little more about. I read a book on the Greek gods and myths surrounding the Greek gods and that pantheon. So those ones I have a little bit more. But again, just kind of read one book, which is not, by no means makes one an expert. But some of these, I don't really know much about them. I don't really readily understand the astrological correspondences that go with them because I don't know enough about them. So for that, I feel extremely book dependent. I really like the art style though. But it's intimidating to me, to just look at these. And I really feel like I need to go to multiple reference books to get as much out of this as I would. And then the rest of the cards, 28 of them, are moon mansions, and they're numbered. So there's like mansion number 1 and mansion number 2. And moon mansions are just something that, the book talks about them being, something at play in several kind of approaches to astrology. But I'm very new to astrology. I'm studying astrology now, on and off. And the moon mansions are not something I had come across really in anywhere except in this deck. So this whole section of cards is also intimidating because I just don't, really know. And they have these, again, astrological correspondences in the bottom that are really specific. And I really feel like this is a deck that I could get a lot out of once I feel like I have studied astrology to a point that I no longer feel really intimidated by a deck like this. Like I would love to feel that way, but right now, and I've done some readings with it, and it comes with some different spreads you can use. And some of the spreads, they will say, pick this many goddesses, this many mansions, and they all have different kind of correspondences. But it feels very mechanistic for me to work with right now because I'm so deeply book dependent. Like I have to look up how to do it, what it means, each card, how, trying to come up with how they relate to each other with my astrology notes and book beside. So just because there's so much going on there and it's so astrologically based, and I'm really just learning, and the more I learn about astrology, I feel like the less I know because there's just so much. So this deck, the Moon Oracle, is definitely an intimidating deck for me, but I hope that one day it will not be. So I want to finish the video by talking about one deck that I was totally intimidated by, and I loved when I saw it, and I was like, I have to have that deck. It's beautiful. No clue. No idea. I'm like, I'll learn to work with it. I'll figure something out, but this deck is a bit scary, and I knew it didn't have a guidebook either. So I was like, that makes it even more so. But that now I feel so happy that I have and comfortable with and have had great readings with and really like working with in all kinds of ways. And that's the Orifold Tarot. And the Orifold Tarot comes in a few different sizes. This is actually the pocket version. And it's by Michael Bridge Dixon, copyright 2015. And the back says, one form, four elements, infinite possibilities, patterns and change, chaotic rhythms, endless cycles, the Orifold Tarot. And all that this deck comes with is this teeny tiny fold out. And it's double-sided, but it basically has a few keywords for each number. So for ace or one, pure element, root, seed. For number 2, duality, balance, opposition, and so on. It has some keywords for each element, which are on the back, because it's a very elemental and numerical kind of system to it. And it even says, sorry, I just read this and it's kind of funny to me. This fold contains minimal guidance when interpreting the Orifold Tarot. Yeah, this is like minimal, right? Use it to initiate discovery of your own relationship with the 4 elements, numbers ace to 10, and their interaction. Explore how your state is affected by air, fire, water, and earth, fully entering each. Meditate upon oneness, two-ness, etc., and see how they're expressed interiorly and exteriorly. And then it has a few reading tips, like how many elements are there, and so on. And a chart detailing the author's elemental association combinations for each of the major arcana. And this deck, I was like, this deck is so pretty. It comes edged in black, and it's really nice. The cardstock is nice. And again, this is the tiny one. The store that I got this from had both the big one and the small one, but the small one just felt good. But this deck is very much just elements and number. So you'll see for the fire suit, for example, ace of fire, 2 of fire, 3 of fire, 4 of fire, and so on. There's the back. Very fitting for this deck. And the majors, similarly, are quite, I don't want to say basic, because it's not basic. Sounds like it didn't put any work in it. But they're quite kind of minimalist in their art, right? So we have the Fool, and in the deck, yellow is air. The Magician. The High Priestess. The Empress. And so on. So when I got this deck, and all I had ever read with was Rider-Waite-Smith style decks, better believe that I was intimidated. I was like, this is beautiful. I have to figure this out. But what the hell am I supposed to get from these circles? Like, terrifying. But now that I've learned to work with pip decks, and it's always, learning's always an ongoing process. But now that I feel at ease with pip decks, and I worked through Tom Benjamin's book that in particular looks at learning to read pip decks or Marseille decks, Tarot on Earth, and really went through that process of thinking about and learning about and working out and reading a ton of other people's meanings of the different numbers, and really getting to kind of have, as corny as it sounds on this pamphlet, like having a relationship with these numbers and what they mean to me to facilitate learning to read pip decks, and simultaneously already having quite strong elemental associations and ways of relating to and living in and understanding the 4 elements. Now this deck just it opens up, right? And it is no longer intimidating. So I am hopeful, given my experience with this deck, that's now one of my favorites to pull out and work with. I'm really hoping that the intimidating Margaret Peterson, the intimidating Moon Oracle, and intimidating Open Portals playing cards will similarly, as I learn and develop new skills, open up to me and become a little bit less intimidating. So that's my thoughts on intimidating decks and a few that have and do intimidate me. Thank you so much for watching. And let me know in the comments, or I'm sure you could make your own VR to Casper at BoyDiviner as well. Let me know in the comments if you have any decks that intimidate you and why, or any decks that once intimidated you that now you love to work with and feel at ease with. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye.